The years since her diagnosis had been a blur of specialists, scans, and frustratingly inconclusive tests. Now, at 19, Anita stared at a different kind of result, one that promised clarity but delivered only chaos. The laptop screen glowed in the dim light of her bedroom, the words close, family shimmering next to a name she'd never seen, Tiffany Reyes. A predicted relationship of aunt was displayed beneath it. Reyes. The name was a foreign object, sharp and unfamiliar. Her mother's maiden name was Peterson. Her dad, Mark, was a Campbell. There were no Reyeses in her world. Her bedroom door creaked open. Mark stood in the doorway, a gentle silhouette against the hall light. "Still up, kiddo?" Anita didn't turn. Her voice was thin, a thread of sound in the quiet room. "It says I have an aunt." Mark walked in, his brow furrowed with concern as he looked at the screen. He read the name, his expression shifting from confusion to a deep, weary understanding. He placed a warm, heavy hand on her shoulder. "Your mom is going to have to talk to you," he said, his voice low. "And I mean, really talk." The next evening, they were at Aunt Jeanette's. It was neutral ground, a place of warm wood, overflowing bookshelves, and the constant comforting scent of brewing tea. Jeanette, with her kind eyes and the air of someone who had long ago stopped being surprised by anything, poured Stacy a cup she didn't touch. Anita sat across from her mother at the heavy oak table. Mark stood behind her, his hand resting on the back of her chair, a silent anchor. "I did one of those DNA tests," Anita began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "For the medical history part. I got a match." Stacy's face was a pale, tight mask. "Those things aren't always accurate, honey. It says her name is Tiffany Reyes. It says she's my aunt." Anita pushed her phone across the table, displaying the profile picture. A smiling woman, with dark, curly hair and eyes that were a startlingly familiar shade of brown. Anita had seen them every morning in her own mirror. Stacy flinched, pulling her hand back as if the phone were hot. "I don't know who that is." "Don't, Stacy," Jeanette said softly from the counter. Her voice was gentle but held a core of steel. "Don't do this to her. Not anymore." Stacy's composure finally cracked. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Anita's voice rose, the carefully constructed calm shattering. "From what? From a family? From knowing who I am? I've been sick for 7 years, Mom. 7 years of doctors asking about family history, of you telling me he was a dead end, that he refused to help. Was that a lie too?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Mark's hand tightened on her chair. "He didn't refuse," Stacy finally choked out, her gaze fixed on the untouched teacup. "He never knew." The confession hung in the air. Anita felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "What?" "His name is Omar Reyes," Stacy said, the words tumbling out in a rush, as if releasing them would lessen their weight. "We were kids, Anita, barely older than you are now. He was smart, and he was kind, and he had his whole life mapped out. College, then med school. He was going to be a doctor." Her laugh was a brittle, broken sound. "Funny, isn't it?" She looked up, her eyes pleading. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was so scared. I saw his whole future, our future, just vanishing. So I left. I moved here to be with Jeanette, and I told him I'd lost the baby. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was giving him his life back." Anita stared, her mind reeling. The man she'd been taught to resent, the faceless villain of her origin story, was an entirely different person. He wasn't a monster who had abandoned his child. He was a boy whose child had been hidden from him. And the health issues? Anita's voice was barely a whisper. "When the doctors started asking, when I was 12 and so sick I could barely get out of bed, you said you reached out." "I did," Stacy insisted, her voice cracking. "I found his sister, Tiffany, online. I sent her a message. I told her I had a daughter who was sick and needed medical history. I didn't say who I was. I was a coward." She wrote back. She was worried. She asked for more information, a name, anything. She said Omar would want to help. But I panicked. I deleted the account. I told you he'd said no. The pieces clicked into place, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. The years of resentment, the blank spaces in her medical chart, the feeling of being half a person with a ghost for a father. It had all been built on a lie. A lie told to protect not her, but her mother's fear. So he's not a deadbeat, Anita said, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. He's a doctor who never knew he had a sick daughter, who he could have helped. Jeanette came over and placed a hand on Stacy's trembling shoulder. She made a mistake when she was a terrified girl, Anita, she said, her eyes meeting Anita's, and instead of fixing it, she built a wall around it. Anita looked from her weeping mother to her aunt's compassionate face, to Mark, whose expression was one of profound disappointment and sorrow. She felt a strange hollow calm settle over her. The anger was there, a hot coal in her chest, but beneath it was something else, a flicker of possibility. She pulled her phone back across the table, her thumb hovering over Tiffany's profile. There were messages exchanged, a polite back and forth between strangers connected by DNA. Tiffany seemed warm, open, asking gentle questions. Anita stood up. The movement was sharp, decisive. I need some air. She walked out into Jeanette's garden, the cool night air a welcome shock. The story of her life had been a book, with the first chapter ripped out. Now, she held the crumpled pages in her hand. Her father wasn't a villain. He was a man named Omar, a doctor. He had a family, a sister with kind eyes, her eyes. They were out there, and they didn't even know she existed. She unlocked her phone, her fingers finding the message thread with Tiffany. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, hopeful rhythm. She took a deep breath, the scent of lavender and damp earth filling her lungs, and began to type. Hi Tiffany, she wrote. My name is Anita. I think you're my aunt. And I think my father's name is Omar. The cursor blinked, a rhythmic, indifferent pulse at the end of the last word. Anita's finger hovered over the mouse, a small tremor running through her hand. A click. The message vanished into the digital ether, a fragile bottle cast into an ocean of unknowns. For 3 days that blinking cursor was all she saw in her mind. The silence from the other side was a physical weight in the quiet of her apartment. Mark would come home from work, find her staring at the blank screen, and place a mug of chamomile tea beside her keyboard without a word. He'd rest his hand on her shoulder, a brief, warm pressure that said everything. He knew this wasn't just about finding a name, it was about finding the reason for the fatigue that clung to her bones, the mysterious aches that doctors had labeled with question marks for years. Her mother, Stacy, had offered only walls and clipped denials. It was Aunt Jeanette who had finally given her the key, a whispered name during a late-night phone call, Omar Reyes. Find his sister, Tiffany. She's on social media. Your mother will never tell you. On the 4th day, her phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. Not an email. A direct message request. The name was Tiffany Reyes. Who is this? Anita's thumbs shook as she typed back. My name is Anita. I sent you an email. I think you're my aunt. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. My brother doesn't have a daughter. You must be mistaken. My mother's name is Stacy. Her sister is Jeanette. They lived in Northwood around 24 years ago. The silence stretched longer this time. Then, a flood of messages. Oh my God. Stacy? With the blonde hair? Jeanette was the sweet one. Omar really liked her. Are you serious? I'm calling my brother. Do not move. I need to call my brother. An hour later, her phone rang. An unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A text from Tiffany followed immediately. That was me. Please pick up. He needs to talk to you. But he wants me to talk first. He's in shock. Anita answered the second time Tiffany called. Tiffany's voice was a rush of bewildered energy. He had no idea, Anita. I swear to you, on my life he had absolutely no idea. He's just been sitting here, staring at the wall. He keeps saying her name, Stacy. He said they broke up and he never heard from her again. She paused, taking a breath. He wants to meet you. He asked if you were okay, and he asked if you were sick. He said he has something he needs to give you. They decided on a small, quiet coffee shop halfway between their cities for the following Saturday. The rain fell in a steady gray sheet as Mark drove, the windshield wipers keeping a hypnotic rhythmic beat. He parked the car but didn't turn off the engine. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice low and steady. "I know," Anita replied, her hand on the door handle. "But I need to." He nodded, understanding. "I'll be right here. Call me when you're done." The coffee shop was warm, filled with the scent of roasted beans and damp coats. Anita chose a booth in the corner, her back to the wall. She ordered a black coffee she didn't intend to drink. 10 minutes later, the bell over the door chimed. A man stood there, shaking the rain from his dark coat. He was taller than she expected, with dark, wavy hair threaded with silver at the temples. He scanned the room, and his eyes, the same deep almond-shaped eyes she saw in her own reflection, landed on her. He walked over slowly, holding a large, worn manila folder in one hand. He didn't look like a stranger. He looked like a piece of a puzzle she never knew she was missing. "Anita?" he asked. His voice was rougher than she'd imagined. She nodded, unable to speak. He slid into the booth opposite her, placing the folder on the table between them. He didn't look at her directly, instead focusing on the condensation on her water glass. "I am so sorry," he began, the words coming out in a pained rush. "I swear to you, I never knew. She never told me. Stacy, we broke up. It was bad. She cheated on me. I left, and I never heard from her or Jeanette again. I always liked Jeanette. I never understood why she cut me off too." He finally lifted his gaze, and the raw apology in his eyes was staggering. "If I had known, I would have been there. I would have fought for you. I never would have let you be alone in this." He pushed the folder forward. "Tiffany told me what you wrote. About having medical issues. I think I know why." He opened the folder. Inside were pages of medical records, charts, and what looked like a hand-drawn family tree. He pointed to a name circled in red. His own. Then to the name above it. His father's. "It's a genetic kidney condition. Polycystic kidney disease. It runs in our family. My father had it, I have it. It's manageable, but it's something you need to know about. Something your doctors need to know about." The clinical words hung in the air, but they felt like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for her entire life. All the uncertainty, all the unexplained symptoms now had a name. A source. "I have all my information in there," Omar continued, his voice softer now. "My specialists, the treatments I'm on. And Anita..." He leaned forward slightly, his hands flat on the table. "If you ever need a donor, if it ever comes to that, I'm a match. I will be your donor, no questions asked. It would be my honor." The apology for his absence was one thing. This offer, this immediate and unconditional promise of a piece of himself to keep her whole, was something else entirely. It was a lifetime of fatherhood packed into a single, desperate sentence. Anita stared at the papers, then back at his face. The face of her father, the weight of 2 decades of questions pressed down on her, too heavy to form a single coherent thought. She slowly reached out and pulled the folder closer, her fingers tracing the edge. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. She took a deep breath, the air finally seeming to reach her lungs. "I'm going to have way more questions. Once I process all of this..." "I know," Omar said, a sad smile touching his lips. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere this time." The silence in the cafe stretched, thin and fragile, held together only by the soft hiss of the espresso machine. Anita's gaze dropped back to the folder, the one that contained not just medical history, but a ghost given flesh, a past made present. Omar's words, "I'm not going anywhere this time," hung in the air between them, a vow that felt both terrifying and solid. "I should..." Anita began, her voice still unsteady. She gestured vaguely toward the door. "I have to go. There's a lot to deal with." Omar's nod was understanding, his eyes holding a depth of patience she couldn't fathom. "Of course. My number is on the front page. Call me. Any time, for any reason." She stood, clutching the folder to her chest like a shield. She didn't hug him. A handshake felt absurd. She offered a weak, jerky nod instead and fled into the bright, indifferent afternoon. The drive home was a blur of washed-out color and muffled sound. The house, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene she was about to re-enter. She found her mother, Stacy, in the living room, mechanically folding a basket of laundry. The air was thick with the tense, unsaid things that had festered since their explosive confrontation days before. Mark, her stepfather, sat in his armchair, the newspaper held taut in his hands, but his eyes weren't reading. They were fixed on a point on the wall, his jaw tight. He'd been the rock through every hospital visit, every late-night scare, and now he looked utterly adrift, collateral damage in a war of secrets he'd never signed up for. Anita stopped in the doorway, the folder a palpable weight. Stacy looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Where have you been?" The question was automatic, a mother's reflex, but it landed with a dull, accusatory thud. "I met him," Anita said, her voice clearer now, fortified by the truth in her hands. "I met Omar." The color drained from Stacy's face. She dropped the towel she was holding. Mark slowly lowered his paper, his gaze shifting from his wife to his daughter. The full weight of the situation settling on his broad shoulders. "Anita, please," Stacy whispered, a plea drenched in shame. "We can still fix this. We can be a family." "We are a family," Mark said, his voice low and strained. He stood up, a quiet force of contained anger. "But it's a family built on a lie, Stacy. You didn't just lie to her. You didn't just lie to me. You lied to a man who had a right to know his own child. You made me an accomplice." The pain in his voice was a living thing. "For 20 years I thought I was helping our daughter. Now I find out I was helping you hide her. I was protecting her." Stacy cried, the defense now brittle and worn. "From confusion, from rejection, you were protecting yourself." Anita's voice cut through, sharper than she intended. She thrust the folder forward. "He wasn't rejecting me. He did not know I existed, Mom. Did you even try to contact him and tell him about me? Or was he left us just a better story?" She took a shuddering breath. "He gave me this, his complete medical history. Things my doctors have been guessing at for years. You had a choice every single day of my life to give me this. You chose your secret instead." The words hung there, undeniable. The image of Omar's sad smile, his immediate, unconditional offering, stood in stark contrast to 2 decades of evasion. Stacy crumpled, sinking onto the couch as if her bones had dissolved. She had no more arguments, no more justifications. The truth had scorched the earth around her. Mark walked over to Anita. He didn't look at the folder. He looked at her face, and his own was a mask of grief and unwavering love. "Are you okay?" he asked, the same question he'd asked after every bad diagnosis, every painful procedure. Tears finally welled in Anita's eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I have information now, real information. That has to be a good thing." He pulled her into a fierce hug. "It is," he murmured into her hair. "It absolutely is." Over her shoulder, his eyes met Stacy's. There was no anger left in his gaze, only a profound and weary disappointment. The trust was broken, and the pieces lay scattered around them. Later, upstairs in her room, Anita opened the folder. It was all there, in stark clinical detail: heart conditions, autoimmune predispositions, a genetic trail that led directly to her. It was a map to herself. She traced the lines of text, each one a sentence in a story she was only just beginning to read. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown, this is Valerie. Your aunt. Your dad gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I'm here if you want to talk." Aunt Jeanette, her mom's sister, had been her confidant through the initial fallout, her wisdom a quiet anchor in the storm. "Your mother acted out of fear, Anita, not malice," she'd said. "It doesn't excuse it, but perhaps one day it will help you understand it." Now, here was another aunt, from another side of a family she never knew existed, already reaching out. The world, which had suddenly shrunk to the confines of this painful house, felt like it was expanding again. into something terrifyingly new. She looked from the medical paperwork to the text message, then out her window at the darkening sky. The path behind her was rubble. The path ahead was uncharted. But for the first time it was hers to walk, with a full and honest map in her hands. She had a father who was staying. She had a family that was fractured but perhaps not broken beyond repair. And she had questions, so many questions, but now she had somewhere to go for the answers.